Great. Welcome back, guys. Thank you for leaving the sunshine on time to get here so we can get out early enough to also hang out in the sunshine for dinner. So this was a very good strategy. Now we're going to do the readouts from the last 2 workshops that we missed. So the last 4 workshops. So I'll actually invite, it looks like this is the coffee shop. I'll invite everyone that had a panel, any of the last 4 panels, to come up and have a seat, and then we'll just go down the row giving a quick readout, 2 to 3 minutes. All 4 workshops. So that should be Kate, that should be Melissa, that should be, who else am I missing? Oh yeah, Tanya and Brian and Sandra. They're here. Okay, come on up. On her way back. It would be Kate, but if Kate's running back. Dan, did you sit in on that session? Investigative techniques, the law enforcement one? Did anyone here sit in on that session? Who sat in on it? Who can do the readout? Just like a 2 to 3 minute, summary of what happened. Perfect. I'll leave it to you guys. I think, Tanya, you can probably start. You can
So I'm just
summarizing.
Just a 2 to 3
minute summary of what came out of your session.
Sure. So we did an Oprah style conversation around partnership and collaboration with entities. We talked about, working with legislators, media, and then just ended up having a very candid conversation about the path to healing. So I thought it was great. So Melissa and I did that session together, and she did a great job with just kind of drawing out some kind of questions from my keynote yesterday and having a deeper conversation about that as well. So
essential oils was the theme.
Right. You don't need to believe in it for them to work.
Oh, that was quick. Okay. So our workshop was on, Sandra I don't think is here, though she was a very important contributor to the workshop. Ours was on the idea of digital literacy and organizational literacy for survivors, and how we can basically just trying to identify barriers to survivors acquiring those skills, those competencies, and then also trying to identify different opportunities and strategies for overcoming those barriers. We started out with Sandra sharing her experience and reminding us that a lot of times trauma is a barrier to both of those things, to acquiring skills, to fitting in within an organization, feeling comfortable and succeeding in those spaces. And she was also sharing that we really need to be able to help survivors identify their strengths in order to work in these spaces and to acquire these skills. So some other barriers that were identified was resources in terms of time, coaching, money, training. All of those different things are a challenge for creating barriers to acquiring these skills. And then another thing that was pointed out by Lauren was that our organization's ready to employ survivors to go down that path. Like doing a self-assessment, working with survivors to do kind of an organizational assessment and say, are we ready do we have the capacity to create a safe space, to create a learning space, and being able to not just jump into that, but to intentionally approach that process. Marty was talking about respect and transparency, that the process has to start with respecting the skills that are present, and then transparency on what is expected in terms of job, so whether it's salary requirements, job description, all of those things. Extra communication, extra transparency is very important for ensuring success. And then Sarah, I believe that's how, am I pronouncing your name right? Sarah, I'm sorry, was talking about the fact that businesses and organizations have to take on that responsibility of figuring out how to provide that training and those skills, rather than saying, well, survivors just need to find these things or have them to be employable. But we have to kind of take that responsibility on as a community to do that. And then we move to talking about resources and opportunities that are available. Jennifer was sharing about different resources. She was talking about Everfree and 10,000 Windows have some excellent resources available, so check out their website. She was also talking about the Freedom Business Alliance has a code of excellence for organizations that employ survivors, and it's available on their website, so you can check that out as well. And then we were talking with Anna about the UN Trust Fund for Contemporary Forms of Slavery and how that also was a path to getting some funding for some of these things. And she was talking about the fact that she's going to be working with the UN to try and figure out how we can incorporate some of these technological aspects into what happens with that trust fund. So that's me.
That was an excellent summary, Brian. My gosh. That's how you know a communication director is in the house. Very clear.
So simultaneously with your session over there, took a very different approach. One of the reasons that I so value attending these forums, whether it's the global ones, this is my first regional one, is actually getting to meet people that are doing really impactful work. And so that's what we did. We sat at a round table, learned that Robert works for Microsoft. What? That was a surprise for all. No, just kidding. But we got to spend some time hearing, I think there was about 8 or 10 of us, and the work that each of you all are doing, which was just outrageously impressive. You know, being in this field for 12 years, I have moments of discouragement of, are we moving the needle? Like we talked about earlier, like how far is the needle moving? And just knowing that there's so many different approaches, areas of specialty, whether it's minors, that you've been doing it for 20 years, getting high schoolers and middle schoolers involved, or now engaging men in a really intentional way. It was just focusing on victims in Vietnam, all the way on the other side of the world. It was really exciting to see each person's kind of approach to ending trafficking, and then sitting around a table just felt like we were linking arms and strengthening our efforts. And so it was a real honor to sit amongst you guys and hear we limited it to a 12th floor elevator speech. That's the time that everyone had.
The thing that I'm summarizing, but it was a discussion on the technology that exists that's like actionably helpful for law enforcement, not just kind of like, hey, do you guys want to use this, but like made for their use case. And it was not that many specifically named. And then a strong discussion of like, here's the types of things that we would need around digital behavior that we could identify related to labor or sex trafficking, and the type of technology, I guess, helpful, and a decent amount of discussion around the most innovative forms of current technology, artificial intelligence, the biases that exist, and some of the inaccuracies that are possible, because for law enforcement, we don't want trend information, we don't want like generic information. It has to be like incredibly specific and accurate. And that's not a lot of the emphasis right now on a lot of the newer tech. And, you know, sometimes OpenAI is just making shit up, for example. So it's like definitely not always accurate. So how do we find ways for that innovation to tailor specific actionable stuff? And also there's tons of stuff that's already proven. How do we start applying it more to use cases that maybe are less profitable? I think there might have been other discussions, but those were my takeaways as a law enforcement person in the room.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's very, very helpful. And I do know that that was a very, you know, we were very grateful to all of our workshop leaders for being so flexible with the new timescales. And I know that that session in particular was a virtual presentation. So I think we're very grateful that everyone was so accommodating. So thank you all. That was wonderful. I'm not actually asking anyone else to leave the stage, but I'll invite Tanya and Melissa to stay because I believe, thank you guys so much, I believe Dr. Bello will be leading our first of 2 facilitated discussions. So now as we're bringing the forum to the close, we've moved the discussion from yesterday to today, which actually may be a great move because it seems like so much more has come to the fore and so much has come up in these panels and discussions. So now that all of the concentrated talks are now concluded, I think this is a great opportunity to have both facilitated discussions, the first one with Dr. Bello and then the next with Dan. And then Bukeni will wrap up with next steps. So I think this actually is kind of a really nice next couple of steps to round out the forum. So on to you.
Awesome, awesome. How's everybody feeling? I loved when Anna came back, whoever did that yesterday, and we shook around and did that, but it's the end of the day, so I guess we don't have to do that now, but you can stretch around in your chair. I think that you all have this document in front of you. You also had an email previously that talked about the reason why, and so I just want to make a little brief introduction, and I've invited 2 incredible thought leaders to just embrace with all of us. And so the initial narrative that was done, we're going to talk about that as well, but 2024 to 2025, the Freedom from Slavery Forum is giving the series of an opportunity for regional and global stakeholders within the anti-modern slavery movement to co-construct narrative. And so I want to make that plain that this is a co-construction. And after this here and 2 other forums, we'll be sending an email out this week where there's individuals globally that we'll be inviting to a Google Meet to have further discussion so we can come together around the world and create a draft to submit that everyone can really buy into. And I think that's really, really important. We know that social and political narratives are intricate and complex, and it can be very emotional and very opinionated for people. And so we want everyone's buy-in with that. I think what's really important, the climate change narrative, which was a foundation and a template for looking at, even when my partner is Rosemary Mann, the climate change sort of consortium around the world did a really good job in creating one document that's a global narrative that the whole world actually can embrace. They either hate it because they don't believe in climate change, but for those of us who do, we really embrace that narrative. And the climate change narrative has successfully created this symbolic convergence through a vision of reality. And I think that's important to note. And so hopefully you had a chance to read the previous narrative. How many of you read the previous narrative and how many of you read the current one, which was a draft? Narrative for the movement. How many of you read that in the document or in the email? Raise your hand if you read it. Now, I think one of the aspects in the proposed detailed narrative that we want to talk about, and one of the challenge with that narrative for some survivors of sex trafficking, what climate change does really, really well, and so this would be open dialogue, is they talked about the issue from a global perspective and how it affects all people. And the buy-in was you really understand it at all layers and all variants. One of the challenges for some, and I understand that, but we have to figure out how to get past all of that, is How many of you think human trafficking is only victims of sex trafficking? That the root causes of trafficking are so vast and so extraordinary that sometimes, even though we think we know the root causes, there's probably more, depending on where it is in the world. Would you say that there are a lot of variant root causes? Absolutely. All of us know basically that labor trafficking analytics may outnumber sex trafficking or organ trafficking or domestic servitude, or maybe not sometimes, but the correlation of labor trafficking, how many of you think, also has a predisposition into certain forms of sex trafficking? So there was a challenge with some of the terminology around the different types of trafficking. Talk about now is how do we get past all of that to move the movement forward and create a narrative that the whole world can embrace, that everyone, regardless of where you come from, regardless if you have lived experience or not, that you absolutely understand it, that it's the most pressing challenge of our time and growing, and that you want to embrace. With Tanya, and I'm going to read the first line of the proposed sort of detailed narrative. And first line, and we're just going to skip through a little bit. Proposed detailed narrative for the movement. It is on the second page. Due to human vulnerability to a complex web of social, economic, and political conditions. Let's start there, because we're going to skip around. Would you say that was true or false? Do you love that? Opening. Why or why not? I think it's true. When it comes to, do you have a,
Up, so I didn't mean to butt into the panel. Is that fine?
that's okay, Karen.
Okay, thanks. I also think it is definitely true, but I don't completely love it for the reason that it doesn't also focus on the individuals doing harm. So, and I feel like this gets at some of the root causes of why people are vulnerable, but it talks about social, economic, and political conditions, which is neutral, and it doesn't get at necessarily the harm doer. So it's not, doesn't totally capture the issue for me.
Very good point.
Thank you.
Very good point. Melissa, any thoughts?
I think that's a really interesting point. We've seen this with the narratives around domestic violence and how through time it got watered down from saying Billy hit Susie to Susie was hit, and it removed Billy from it. It's like Susie, eventually going to Susie as a domestic violence victim. So Billy's taken out of the narrative completely and not held accountable in the, so I think that that's really intriguing. I will just, if I could, caution all of us of the posture to take as we're reading through this, recognizing that this is not going to represent my core. This is not a representative of everything that I prioritize. And so I think as we're having these conversations, I'd love to encourage all of us to take a posture of leaning in and pushing through our personal cores and how we can link arms on things that we can all be to put forth to the global community at large as representatives of the anti-trafficking movement leaders. So this is not your core. This is not your statement, but what can we all be hopeful of through this, that it's going to impact people that don't know some of these really complicated nuances that all of us walk through and navigate every single day. So if I could just put that forth as an encouragement of fostering.
Absolutely. I think that Tanya had a quick, and then.
And so as you were talking, even though you asked me that question when you were talking, I was kind of stuck there, right? Thinking about what can we all agree on? And personally, and I think I mentioned it in my keynote, that if we can't agree that all human life has value, then how can we agree on anything else? Because, I think of all the things we stomp on or pull our signs up for, none of it is, how common we are or how we all are human. Like the fact that human beings are being exploited is enough for me. And then the question for me is, I feel like, why isn't it enough for everybody?
That's beautiful. I'll just follow up, and then it is for the whole of society, to have a whole of society approach. And with climate change, most people know that as climate change progresses in a negative way, you instantly know heat migration. You get it. You get when you see plastic bottles all over the ground. You understand pollution. You understand weather change and the shift of the weather. You understand when you've seen individuals just who clean the oceans come up with pounds and pounds and pounds of plastic and litter in the ocean, and you get it immediately. Everyone relates to it. When you believe in it, you really see it. The question is, how do we take this issue of human trafficking in all of its forms, in all of its relation to everyone in the world, so see it?
Such an interesting and important part of the contributions we can make at these forums, I think, because we have the opportunity as the leadership of many of the organizations and stakeholders in this space to really weigh in. And I think part of democratizing the movement as an academic is also to share the proceeds, share our knowledge in a way that's accessible, that makes sense and can be used. So when I look at these documents, I always wonder, from a policy perspective, what do we think we're going to do with this narrative, and how does that inform what goes into it, right? So when you're mentioning the climate change intersection, that's huge because that ties us in a policy way to the prevention of climate change in addition to the prevention of human exploitation. Perfect. Whole of society approach, that's perfect. I'm wondering if there's a way, especially when we talk about common phrasing or funding priorities or different things like that, if that's a valuable contribution from this group to kind of go back out to the broader field. Like when we represent the current state of the modern slavery field, there are some truths universally that we've come to over the years that we can agree to. I think there's value, kind of like what you were saying about the survivor narrative that came out about the terminology that we prefer to have used. This is our opportunity to communicate that. And I'm just wondering, maybe what other subheadings do you think we can add to this document that we take as assumed knowledge because we're so intimate versus what we can just put out there for the rest of the field?
Excellent point. How many minutes? We have 10 more minutes, or? Comment?
So when I started learning about human trafficking, or when I try to educate it, to go to your point, how do we, get everybody involved, right? So I start off by just attacking the issue from like a 5-year-old. So one of the things to change the thought process is, and I hope this is not offensive, but I've heard people use the term prostitution, the world's oldest profession, right? And then I go, because we're the world's oldest customer. So it's like, how do we start changing people's mindset to see that we're all, I know that labor trafficking is the lead, and that involves us all, but we don't talk enough about how we are all involved. Like if you buy a cell phone, you can buy clothes, you can buy food. There's a statistic that we have a minimum of 40 to 60 slaves working for us. So when I talk about stuff, I try to involve it all to show people that we all have something to add, or that we're all connected to this. So
That's a really good point, Victor. So we're going back to the opening statement, and then we're going to take the next point. Exploitation occurs due to human vulnerability, to a complex of both social, economic, and political conditions, and we started there. And then that's the opening. Then it says, these factors originate. And so the opening statement today needs a little work, as you said, Karen, to incorporate, and that's what the discussions will be about. And that's what the redlining will be about, and all the suggestions and everyone buying in. We're not going to create the final, but we're going to give them enough of a draft and enough of ideas so they can take that draft and do something extraordinary with it. And we have to thank the Freedom from Slavery Forum and Freedom Slaves Organization for taking this on as a suggestion, because when the original document was done, not everyone was a part of it, and it's been over 20 years. And so really good time for someone to take it on and look at it with open eyes. And we're inviting a global population to really look at this, and even the ones who originally worked on it. So everyone feels like, yeah, this is cool, this is great, this is needed. But the efficacy is important. So I love this point, because the whole of society does play a part on some level. I wanted to go down to the third paragraph from the opening, and then we'll go back to the second paragraph, and I want to get your opinion. While the numbers of those trapped in exploitation are staggering and alarming, they represent a fractional percentage of the global population, and the cost of addressing this issue represent a fraction of global economic activity. That statement, do you understand it in a way that pulls you in and draws you in? Any comments? Okay. Yeah, you.
It's downplaying the issue a little bit
Okay.
in my reading of it.
I was, oh wait, Brook.
Like what she was saying, and my reaction was that it's acting like everything weighs the same. Like, sure, it's fractional, but does it have the same weight as some of the other things that might be a similar fraction? And if it does, like, what does that say about us? That was my.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
A little bit differently as more of an argument that this is solvable. That it starts off saying the numbers are staggering and alarming, which at least pulls us in that this is an important problem. So I read the second part of the sentence really as saying this is something that should be solvable by us. It's not, the cost of addressing the issue, because it only affects a fractional percentage of the population. It makes it more solvable because the cost of addressing it is only a fraction. It also makes it achievable. So I felt like it was saying this is very important because it affects so many people, but yet as a bigger proportion, it's something we can do. That's how I heard it.
Yeah, and I think that's the meaning. I think you're right, but it's all about wording. It's all about, and so when the climate change narrative was written, it was also a while ago. And so the world is becoming more visual. There's more poetic, quick visual aspects, even to certain documents where you're drawing people in. So you have to have, in my conversations with Free the Slaves, you want to really have the buy-in to the public policy aspects and the facts and the analytic details to what's really taking place. But the narrative has to incorporate things that actually touch the heart And you want people to get it, to see it, to feel it. And this proposed detailed narrative for the movement, in my opinion, is somewhat stale. It doesn't pull everybody in. It's a good start, but it's like a draft. And to a point spoken earlier when I asked this question to one of the panels, sex trafficking feel that they're not heard. Well, how do we empower survivors of sex trafficking even more because of the profound pain of what that violence does, so that even survivors of sex trafficking and any form of human trafficking can really embrace the narrative and be excited about being a part of what that narrative will be, and have it as something that they can honor. Did you want to go back to, you're just waiting for so long, we want to be.
Sure. Interrupt the conversation you're having, which is useful on paragraph 3, but I will jump back into the first paragraph, where in the list of people who marginalize, oppress, and exploit, we have criminals, opportunists, and business people. The tension of that third point. I understand how we're thinking about it possibly, but I think suggesting that business belongs in the same category as criminals and exploiters, people whose purpose is to do harm, is a poor way of situating them in relationship to us in the movement. I think business people can be powerful problem solvers, and that we want to position ourselves and them as allies in the fight. So I would just say that putting capitalist processes.
Can you point to where you're reading so everyone
Certainly.
can see?
It's the second sentence in that first paragraph. It talks about where human beings are marginalized, oppressed, and exploited by criminals, opportunists, and capitalist processes. I think at fault is probably more broken processes, whether they're governmental or business or things. But I would hate to see something in this that makes business people feel like, oh, not us. So somehow we are the problem, but not part of the solution.
Right.
So that's
a really good point. Really great point.
I was going to be back on that third paragraph stuff, but I think that's an interesting question about how we do represent traffickers in general. Are we going by the juridical definition, which would mean that anyone complicit in this, right, is technically under the US TVPA, right? They would all be traffickers. So it's an interesting way to try to like galvanize action by discouraging. The thing I will say from the perspective of like a statistical expert on prevalence is that we can say definitively that this is the minimum we know of, right? We almost know for certain that all of these numbers are underestimates. So we can say pretty confidently, like there could even be like a reframing of just that part of it that would still be accurate by all prevalence. Like I can speak on behalf of like the small echelon of prevalence statisticians in our space. We all agree it's an underestimate. So we can say that at least 1% of the population has been identified and found, but many, many more are vulnerable, experiencing various forms of exploitation, whatever. So like, if it helps us to make the argument that like, you know, I love Karen's point about it being an achievably stoppable thing because there's so few people, that doesn't really change if it's 1 or 3%. But I think we can say that it is affecting more people than we've even been able to find, insofar as we still have to fund prevalence research.
Really, really good. Really, really good. Does anyone have a comment or thought or question? Please stand up. I want to say what it's missing for me also, and anyone can speak to it, is as a writer, I love to start strong narratives with hope, and I like to end with hope. Begin with hope, nor does it end with hope. And I think that there is a poetic way to bring in the factual analytics and reality of the issue. And those are some of the conversations. And so are there any points in here that you've seen, Melissa, just has been explained here now, that that you really love or that you just don't relate to at all, or anything you'd like to share, Melissa or Tanya, or anyone else?
And I love the concept of starting off with hope, because I think that that would be more palatable to the global community at large. I think oftentimes people shy away from engaging in the anti-trafficking field because it feels overwhelming and too dark. And so I really like your recommendation of how do we start this off with a sense of real tangible momentum to make a change. So I want to second that. I think for me, on this particular page, I really appreciate the fourth paragraph where it talks about the core principle of this, it being centered around those that have the lived experience. Going back to what was said earlier of assumed knowledge, sometimes that's just what we all take for granted, that that's a priority in this movement. But if this document is for the community at large, I think highlighting that and emphasizing that is critical.
Any other thoughts?
I do. When I just skimmed the document, for me, it just feels kind of detached, right? Is that okay?
Just be honest.
Okay. It just feels detached, right? And I'd like to see something that isn't a lot of words, that doesn't really mean, I mean, you know, you can use a lot of words, but to me, I just want to, you know, I think words are, well, of course, obviously words are important, right? And sometimes less can be more, right? And so I think paying attention to the words we're using and, you know, do less and, you know, have the hopeful, like you're saying, the hopeful opening and a hopeful ending, where is something people can really, with their heart.
Sure.
Right?
Well, if 70% of communication is nonverbal and a picture is worth 1,000 words, in any document, even public policy, you have to have the moments where you have to have words that absolutely create a picture. So you have to have the analytical words that are factual, but then you have to blend them, I think, with words that help form a photograph, an image. And so what do you all think about, in having conversations so far, when you have a document like this, to list some of the types of human trafficking victims or those that have been victimized around the world, alphabetical order at some point, so that people actually see themselves in it. Hierarchy based on any one type of human trafficking. You're just listing types of human trafficking that we know so far that occur to millions of individuals around the world. And they're listed there. And then you have this bulk document that this perpetual collaboration. Kate? You're such a brilliant, incredible person from Canada, Alberta.
Prepared, but thank you, Brooke. No, I think it's outstanding. Your comments resonate with me about impactful language, but also balancing that with sensationalizing the issue, which of course we're all very aware of and trying not to do, while trying to also communicate the impact of it. And I appreciate your points, Melissa, too, about the first kind of opening sentence and how it does sort of frame it as exploitation occurs because of human vulnerability instead of exploitation occurs because someone is using human vulnerability for their own benefits, you know, and that's something that really sits with me the most. Yeah.
Brilliant, wonderful. I love that, Kate. So we don't have to go into a lot of dialogue. How many want to be a part of the conversation and be a part of at least one Zoom or Google Meet call to whiteboard and break it down? Okay. So yay, 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 yay. So those of you who do, you can get my information. You already have Dr. Balfour and Aline's information. So email them and me, and you can even bug Melissa. And I'm getting Tanya in there now. And we're going to be a part of some conversations with some leaders all around the world. And on those calls, everyone will have a certain amount of time. Every call is about 90 minutes to 2 hours. And so you'll be giving that amount of time. And I'm not sure yet. I know we talk about survivors and gift cards, so I don't know. But but I want to make sure that everyone is on the call through friends of mine, that you're honored in some way, even if it's just a digital greeting card to tell you you're amazing. But this is really important. Appreciate it. So please email us right away. And so everyone that's raised your hand, raise it again. Dr. Balfour, you see these beautiful people? They're going to be, so basically email everyone and say, and so the next call is going to be probably in a couple of weeks. And the next one will be after the next forum. And we'd love for you to be a part of all of them, but if you can't, at least one. And there's going to be a Google Doc that's encrypted, and you'll all have access to it. And so you'll be able to go in and put comments beside each paragraph, and then we'll analyze those and discuss those. Is that a good idea? If anyone has a better one, let me know, but I've talked to some friends and they seem to think that's good. Well, I think we're going to be the shortest panel discussion, and thank you so much. We're really excited about it.
Thank you. Again, we don't expect anything less from our master moderator, Dr. Bello. She can get us right back on track. So with that, Dan, you have a tough act to follow up here, but I believe your facilitated discussion is next. And Bukeni, you're on deck. Let's see. Other than the podium? Okay, perfect.
Good.
We got it.
We got it. All right, well, thank you. I'm going to do something that I think we all will appreciate. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. We're going to collectively come together. We're going to learn some stuff. But I think part of the request that I do is kind of like a summary of what we've done, what we're learning, and then all of us collectively working together to come up with some solutions or responses to what we're taking away from this. But I think what we can take away from this, first and foremost, is technology is a lens or another filter or ultimately a tool that provides aid in this field. And it's something that can help us in this regard. But as exciting as it is, we also have the responsibility of not rushing forward or adapting something prematurely without making sure we're doing it right or not making missteps. I think Mark Zuckerberg is famously known for when he was starting up Facebook, his statement was, let's move fast and break stuff. Now, that is not the approach we want to have, right? We want to make sure that we are working with individuals that have experienced exploitation, that have been manipulated. And so we need to, it is our responsibility to have these discussions, to evaluate, to explore the best and safest ways to employ technology. And so that's what this has been. And so in doing so, we also need to be willing to hear scrutiny or be asked hard questions. So I think it's something that we are doing, and that's what is so good about what we're experiencing here today and this past couple of days. So we also need to consider that our solution that may be made stronger by collaborating with someone else. We might say, hey, I have a solution that's taking place, but I've learned of a new technology I can employ as well. Or be willing to acknowledge that we might need to spend some more time in refining our solution. And so that's what we were looking at doing and saying, hey, if I don't do this the right way, if I don't take the time to evaluate, I could potentially cause more harm. So one of the things I want to do too is kind of build the foundation. Where are we starting from? Our first night here, a couple of us grabbed dinner, and one of the things that was said, Davina's like, you need to bring that up again in the conversation. And that comment was made, was basically talking about that we need to operate in a way of humility and grace, right? We need to understand that our platform is more effective when we operate in that way, meaning that we know we don't know everything. I think a better way to ask the question is, if I were to pose this to you, who here has done something stupid? Right? Brian, thank you. I wanted to see your hand raised. We can all understand we've done something stupid. So for me, I remember when I was dating my girlfriend, who's now my wife, one night I was driving home from her house, and I almost hit something on the side of the road. And I stopped and I pointed my car at this thing, showing my lights on it, and realizing it was a horse. So there was a horse standing 2 feet on the road, 2 feet in the grass. And I almost hit it with my car. And I got out of my car, kind of surveyed the situation, and then being a good citizen, I decided I should do something. So option A was to, smack the horse in the rear and see if it goes home. Option B was do nothing. That wouldn't be a good citizen though. Or option C, which really shouldn't have been an option, was to proceed to grab the horse by the mane, mount it bareback, and then smack it on the rear. So I had some familiarity with horses. Anyone here ever ride horses? Okay, you probably know this option C is not the best option, but I also knew that horses, when scared, will run home. And so I, being a young 20-something, decided it was a good option for me to grab this horse by its mane, mount it bareback, and then smack its rear. And sure enough, it starts running down the road, and I'm passing one house and another house and another house. And I'm thinking, okay, I hope it knows where it's going. And then finally, it turns down this long gravel driveway, and I see at the end of this driveway is a gate that's open to a stable. And I think to myself, yes, I know what I'm doing here. And I felt pretty proud of myself until the moment I see as it's running towards that gate, towards that opening, it is running towards a tree at the same time with a low-hanging branch with the intent of clearing me off its back. So I see this tree coming in. At the same time, fortunately, there was a pickup truck. I was able to jump off the back of the horse, land on the tailgate of the pickup truck, and the horse ran under the branch into the stable. I closed it up. I went and I told the owner of the house, who was very confused. I said, I just put this horse away. It was down the street. And the best part of the story, and it's all true, but the best part is I get back to my car, and it's the middle of the night. I turn my car on and set this beautiful song by Bon Jovi. And it's at the line where it says, I'm a cowboy on a steel horse I ride, and I'm wanted dead or alive, right? And I tell this story for the sake of if we redid this, right, and you were there with me, and for whatever reason, I decided to take option C again, but this time I got injured, I got hurt. And Bukeni, if you were there with me and said, Dan, you were an idiot, you got what you deserved, right? I would have to agree with you. And I think I'm saying this all is because when we serve others, when we are called to serve, we are called to do this work, we have to approach it with humility and grace, because we've all raised our hands and said we've done stupid things or we've misstepped, right? And we need to take that knowledge and apply it to whenever we are serving and doing this type of work. We should never be arrogant enough to think that we have it all figured out, or arrogant enough to think that I'm the best one to do it. We need to come together in collaboration, work together with this intent and goal that we can together collectively come up with a better solution. Here. And so today we want to come together, and I said I'm going to keep it short, so we're going to move to this next section. We're going to have a table discussion. I want you guys to spend a few minutes talking together. So we talk about, when we're talking about how to best serve, we talk about the 4 Ps: prevention of trafficking, protection of victims and survivors, prosecution of traffickers, and partnerships for strength and response. And these are areas where we can all improve. Now, I know this is the end of a conference, and it wasn't my idea. It was Giselle. I don't know where she is. We can blame her. She said we should get up and move around, so we're going to do that. But we're not going to do it for terribly long. So the way I'm going to do this is we're going to take each one of these Ps, and we're going to divide it up, and we're going to have a table discussion around that. And so if you could, what I'm going to basically do is split the room in 4, this way and this way. So if you're sitting on the camera side, and I'm going to have you move around. So in the back, you're going to kind of go to 2 groups of 4 or 5. In the front, 2 groups. And then we're going to have a brief discussion about how you can see technology helping in each of these sectors. And I'll quickly, once you divide up, we're going to do this really quick so then we can wrap. Again, this isn't my idea. I don't want to take blame for it. So let's do this real quick. We'll split up into 4 groups, have a brief discussion, then we'll come back and we're going to wrap up for our session here. So, and then what we're also going to do is you're going to talk about, this group here is going to talk about prevention of trafficking and how technology can aid in that. And then we're going to have someone come up and briefly share what they talked about. All right. Back there, you're going to talk about protection of victims and survivors, how technology can aid in that. All right. So protection in the back. All right. Here in this area, I'm not sure, there's like floating people. We're going to say, all right, your table will be prosecution of traffickers. And then up here will be partnerships. So prevention of trafficking, protection of victims and survivors, prosecution of traffickers, and partnerships. What we want to hear are your ideas, things that you have learned from these last 2 days that you can apply to what our discussion is. So when we're done in just a few minutes, we're going to have someone from each table just share something that you've collectively learned. So again, prevention of trafficking, protection of victims, prosecution of traffickers, how can technology help in doing that? And then up here, how partnerships are going to strengthen our response and partnership in technology. So go, spend a little time and then we'll reconvene. Minutes, and we're going to just have one person from each table come and share benefits and also cons, if they're negatives and something that you're discussing that you could share. There's been a lot of good discussion. We're going to wrap this portion of it up. So what we want to do is at most of the tables, there's a microphone. Hopefully they will work. They're going to need to be turned on. What we're going to want to hear is just a kind of a quick summary from your table relating to your topic, and so the idea is we want to have this discussion because there are a lot of minds here coming back to the idea that we are best able to provide a solution when we work with grace and humility, understand that we do not know everything, but collectively we can know a lot more. So I want to I'll start with, they're all talking over there. They're like the bad students. We'll go with the good students in the back there. Is there anything about protection for victims and survivors that you wanted to share or discuss, both pros and cons at your table?
So I'll just say that we, first of all, please, I'm in a learning mode, so any of my table mates should jump in if I get it wrong. But we first explored the sort of definition of protection. We looked up the sort of written definition, and it included the words rescue, rehabilitation, and reintegration, which we all agreed are horrible words. So we started to sort of put down a list of the things around protection that we saw under this, including protecting the privacy of data, of names, of protecting futures, of clearing the records, expunging and detaching survivors' names from their forced labor experience, protecting their credit, so expunging credit reports, protecting their access to information, translating it into many languages, for example, protection around physical and mental health, protecting for decent livelihoods, sustainable livelihoods. We engaged with the word rescue, with the rescue piece of protection, and talking about safety, even though we reject the word, safety planning and risk management for leaving or exiting. Rescue from a false identity that was thrust upon an individual during their experience, protection of their access to services, and this idea of exit, of supporting exit and or leaving, saving, rescuing, and exploring that language part of protection. So that's what I will offer from our table.
That's great. There's a lot of good points in there, and things for us to consider and when we're utilizing technology, right? Not to rush forward without evaluating, because there are protections and things that could be considered or accomplished in taking that time. So thank you for sharing that. Up here, this table, you were talking about prevention, how technology may aid in prevention. Any thoughts?
So loud. It's really loud, right?
You're good.
Okay. So we workshopped a lot of ideas. I don't think we talked about as much as what happened in the conference as just coming up with new stuff over here. So these will need further workshopping, but starting with addressing mental health and healthy relationships and how technology could be used to promote self-love, especially since, we see social media kind of having the opposite effect on people, how we can create technology that is promoting unconditional love or self-love in some form. We talked about how some Reddit forums do that. So maybe building off that. And then we moved into workers. So basically, how having trusted grievance mechanisms in place, that also puts pressure on employers to have good working conditions because they know the workers have access to report them, and then also making sure the workers are well informed about their rights, and having, the availability of their contracts in their language. Some other ideas we came up with was maybe like fake phishing for workers on, common platforms like Facebook, that would then be like, oh, you almost fell for this scheme. Like, this is to raise your awareness about that there are schemes like this looking for workers that aren't legitimate. Then like having an AI system to vet labor recruiters so that someone could send in a job ad and be like, is this legitimate? Is this employer legitimate? And third one was limiting access to apps maybe through having like an ID you need to enter. That way, people can't, underage people cannot access certain commercial sex industry technology until they are of age. And then just most generally using social media to raise awareness around these issues.
Yeah. Those are great. It looks like, is there another one?
The whole thing of prevention is really putting the onus on individuals. You know, how do I, become responsible? Like, if I give a kid love, then they set boundaries and I take away a lot of their vulnerabilities. If I give a trafficker love, then maybe I don't traffic, because everybody knows that the trafficker and the victim comes from the same household, right? I always say that's where they're created, from trauma. So how do we, going back to the mental health and addressing, making that a really high point of addressing these issues so that I'm healed, I can pass this heal to my kid. And the more that I'm healed and loving myself, that makes me less vulnerable to becoming a victim to any of this stuff.
You officially done? There was an idea.
Davina wants me to emphasize the fake phishing for workers. It sounds like. Yeah, we also talked about like fake modeling ads, things like that would really get people's attention, thinking this is a great opportunity, but then you kind of get further along the process and would be like, look, like that's when I don't know if anyone has fake IT phishing in their office, but it sucks.
Yeah.
It does work though. Like I'm super cautious now that I've had to retake the training like 3 times.
Well, thank you for that, sharing that prevention. And then at this table, you're talking about prosecution.
On that fake phishing, the organization Eliberare in Romania did actually run an online campaign, people looking for jobs in Romania, being aware it's one of the countries where people are most vulnerable to being trafficked in Europe. Exactly what you describe, excellent, very well done. What they also did though was they captured the data of who was signing up for information about these jobs, what age they were, what region of the country they were in, which allowed them to design prevention campaigns that were geared to the most vulnerable age groups in the most vulnerable regions of the country. So it is a great idea, and it has been used, and I can connect you with Liberare for more information. If they followed with prosecution, but we will.
Yeah, and if you want to leave it on, I was going to say your table 2 to share on prosecution relating to that. Any ideas or solutions or thoughts?
So I'm surrounded by 5 geniuses at this table, and we were talking about prosecution, and thank you, Dan, for pushing us past our comfort zone, because we were like, we want prevention and we want partnership. And so thank you for pushing us out of the comfort zone, which is exactly what we need to grow. So a few things we collaborated on, identifying the perps. I don't know if you remember To Catch a Criminal many years ago. They had that going on, which I was like, okay, that was really needed. And I think it was, it should have been a lot sooner. We have people on the moon. We have technology that it's just absolutely amazing. And like, we're still dealing with this. And so another thing is building cases. We can use AI to build those cases with evidence, testimonies. We also talked about using virtual reality, and came up with that one. I didn't write any details about that one, but you mentioned virtual reality, which I think was very good. And securing testimony, exactly. And then software models to scrape ads. And I think we are doing that. using AI to search for key terms. There's a child pornography, a ring that's really visible. You just have to type it in and it comes up. So I'm a little taken aback about that because there's so many contradictions in the US. We talked about how the US contradictions with the economical gains versus human life and human protection. So it's like we have this blind justice, this beautiful blind justice with this long gown and the scales in our hand and we're weighing, but I believe in America, we have a lot of contradictions with this, like because of the economic gain to a lot of these things. Do we really want change? So yeah, we have to talk about that. Victor mentioned something that's very dear to my heart, and that is with victims and perpetrators are bred in the same home environment. They come from a home, they come from a family. And so I wrote about this many years ago as a survivor. A lot of perpetrators I found in my research have been victims. And so hurt people, we hear that all the time. And so how many batterer programs do we know about with domestic violence batterer? That came out a lot, especially in the 60s. But how many human trafficking perpetrators or sex buyer programs where we have that same type of dynamic, that same type of program where we're offering these people help for the pathology? Okay, awesome. And see, that's why she's the amazing Dr. Brook and the brilliant Dr. Brook. Because this week, we're not balancing out our efforts here if we're not thinking also about the perpetrators. It's like, oh yeah, we're thinking about prosecuting them. Oh yeah, let's prosecute the perpetrator. How about wondering about what's the pathology? Let's do some research on the pathology of these perpetrators. What's making them do what they do? And again, as a survivor, I care deeply about survivors and perpetrators and how we can help them overcome that. And I think that is it. Now, knowledge sharing and collaboration between organizations you mentioned, and I think that was it.
Thank you, guys. And I know there's a comment, I guess, that wanted to be made. Could you pass your mic up to this front table when you get a chance? Yes.
Add something on those legitimate jobs. The AIs, we should create a system that actually create the awareness for those third-party contractors, because usually what happens is not only with the people that we're being from overseas, that they come through a contractor and they being trafficked, the company that they work for, they don't even know what's going on. At hotels like Hilton and Marriott, especially here in Florida, they got to go through a training on human trafficking. Every new employee had to go through that training. But if you are from a third party, you're not allowed to take those training. So what should we do to internally as a company to create awareness for those people that are working in our company and make sure that they are not being trafficked? And it's happening with a lot of third party because those companies, they don't even know what's going on with those employees because they are not their employees. They're just working there, but they don't have to do anything with them. So, and sometimes we're missing it. Like, the trafficking situation is happening at a legitimate company with a legitimate work, a job, and we don't even see it. So I think that technology had to do something about it.
That's another area for opportunity to provide resources. One more comment I think was up here, and then I want this table to wrap.
That because I got an answer for you that, but going to the prosecution side, and I don't know if this really adds to it, but one thing that, I've been pushing for a long time is having human trafficking on police reports, because in that way we get better numbers, because if I want to find out how many robberies are in this area, that's easy. But the one thing that having human trafficking on a police report would do is force law enforcement to learn about human trafficking. And coming from law enforcement, I'm telling you, a lot of law enforcement people do not know the basics about human trafficking.
Good thought, good thought, thank you. And then this last table was about partnerships, things that we can see, pros and cons of that.
So we started out by talking about how partnerships or technology can assist partnerships for families and survivors who are living in more remote areas or northern areas or more geographically isolated places, and that partnerships are can be a great opportunity to present survivors with more options. So your organization has a limited capacity of what it can do or a mandate, but there are so many other options, and also looking at sort of, you know, the continuum from like prevention, prosecution, all across the board. Like it's essential to have partnerships to really facilitate that over a survivor's journey. We talked about what makes partnerships feel like nourishing, which is trust, relationships as the basis for that partnership, and acknowledging that this takes a lot of time. It has to be very like genuine. It's not something that can be rushed. We also talked about what made partnerships feel not so like generative or nourishing, and a big one being, you know, when there isn't trust built, when someone just comes in and is looking to either tokenize survivors or tokenize a particular type of survivor, when they're just looking, when it's very much like a one-sided thing. So we talked about media and working with journalists and how difficult that can be, that in one sense it can be a really important partnership, but also media can be highly extractive, and we have to have a really high standard of care and ethics for how we engage in that. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it.
That's great, thank you. And so what I hope kind of is, as we kind of come to an end here, and for me, as I was distilling this down, what does this look like? This was part of that response, the distillation of ideas and thoughts, and what was done, how that was done, is that you passed around the mic. The voice was shared throughout the room. And so I was talking to Robert from, I almost said IBM, he'd be mad, from Microsoft, and we were talking about how, you know, he said he comes from the world of geeks and nerds. And I said, you're speaking my language. I love that stuff. And so I used to work in engineering, and I was talking to a professor at a local university, and we were talking about sound waves, right? And as he was telling me about sound waves, I learned something that I'd never known. And he explained something to me, something that's called pure constructive interference. And he said, you know, if you envision my hand, my fingers as sound waves, like the peaks and valleys of a sound wave, he says, there's something that happens, this pure constructive interference, when another sound wave comes along and it's in sync in time and sound. And what happens in pure constructive interference, that sound wave doesn't just come and slightly increase, it actually doubles fully in size. So those peaks and valleys become louder, they merge, they become amplified. And so our voices, when we are willing to share our thoughts, when we are willing to collectively talk together and say, this is my idea, let me hear your idea, when we approach it with humility and grace and say, I don't know everything, I want to learn from you, and we have that same unified voice, our message is amplified. And last year I had the opportunity, I was at the other forum in the DR, and every year, Worthwhile Wear, we work on short films, we work on stories, we tell stories through video, and I actually had Aline and Brian and some others from the staff, and maybe you didn't even know this, we were working behind your back. We had a short film that we were creating that was helping tell the story of trauma, but this past year, we created a short film, to help share the story of freedom, the voice of freedom. And I thought, you know, this is a great way to understand that there's an underlying tone of this work, this movement, is that we have a unified voice. And when we have a unified voice, we have a voice that is carried further beyond these halls. And so they have a video. I just asked if they would play it. It's only 60 seconds. Hopefully they'll have the sound up to help us kind of think about how do we want to proceed as a group. And this was written by a survivor, Christina Glacken, who is a survivor of trafficking, also a wonderful mother and a spoken word poet. And this is a collaborative effort we did.
Silenced, trapped inside the prison of my mind as it echoes the lies.
My body is a cage. It's not going to survive.
Until a whisper escapes my lips,
Save me.
acting as the key to my freedom, heard by God. Emptiness, the tool of my enemy, now a weapon in the hands of my creator, allowing my whisper to echo, to magnify, to amplify my voice. It's free, my voice increased, my voice the key for them, for me, until all are free. The voice of freedom could never cease, as an echo that started from a whisper.
So as we close, right, as we wrap, let this message of hope and worth resonate in this hall and beyond. We are an amplifier of that voice. And it was shared as Tanya opened up and shared the beginning. She had this poem about a rose, and she says, "I bring a vibration," right? And Brook, she shared something at the very beginning too. She shared this phrase, "I raise up my voice in love so that others who do not have a voice may be heard." And so this work, even though this conference is about technology, it's a collective discussion and a desire to find solutions to aid this movement. So this conference is about working towards a unified voice, that if in tune, if we work together in sync, we will be magnified. So ultimately, let's allow the true meaning and change happen through our voices collectively. And thank you for this opportunity to come and work together as a group. And I am done.
For organizing that interactive and really engaging session. I think that was a really great way to end our facilitated discussions as we welcome Bukeni up to the stage to tell us what's going to happen next.
Much. I know we are at the end and we want to pack and go back home as we come from different places. But first of all, let me say really thank you so much. This has been 3 great days. We started with a little celebration of being together. It wasn't the reception for the forum, but it was just a celebration of being together. So now we are ending again, we're still together. So this is quite a recognition of how the movement can be if we are all united. So, I mean, it is not easy to come after those speeches from Professor Tim McCarthy and now Dan, and then here I am, try to match to, you know, to their performances, which I can in no way pretend. But I wanted really first on behalf of the team, the Free the Slaves team as a whole, led by, especially the forum team led by Dr. Giselle, and also Aline, to really thank you. Probably, I would like to ask all the Free the Slaves staff to stand up, so that just wave, yeah, just stand, yeah. That is the team. You really, I mean, you can see this is quite a team that makes all of us proud. I didn't do much really. I'm just giving the honor to come and stand here and on their behalf, thank you. We have Dr. Giselle, who has been really the leader of the whole organization of these forums, and also Aline Gajou, who just joined us almost a few months ago, and right now she's been with Free the Slaves for more than 5 years. And then, of course, our colleague Brian, who heads our communications, came all the way from Chiang Mai to Miami. So those are really the core team. And then, the supporting team that include myself, Marie, and Lauren, and Mariam. So we just try to make sure we can support. But also the team cannot be this strong without the support of the board. And that's why we are really very grateful, even though Tim has left for other duties that he had, but he asked me to pass on to his gratitude for really the work very well done. So Davina, who you have seen, the MC, and Karen also had to catch a flight, so that's why she's not here right now, but really very grateful. And also other board members that could not make it to Miami today or on the last, this kind of last 3 days. But really, to make the forum requires cooperation. If we discuss our partnership, it is an important part of what makes this forum very successful. And we are very grateful, really grateful to the work of the planning committee that was chaired by Dr. Brook. So Brook was almost everywhere on, try to make sure this is happening. She did more than you can see or more than you have known. From making sure we have a great location and all of that. So thank you so much, Brook, really. That is really awesome, great cooperation. And we met Brook was just last year in Punta Cana, and really it was her first forum, and now here we are. She's part of the core team that made this happen. And also Kate, who was the vice chair of the committee. Kate, please, you might have seen her here. They were a member of the committee. So also include Crystal Snyder from Canada, Melissa, she's still here? Oh, Melissa also left. She needs to catch a plan. So these were really the 5 leaders that helped really organize this, to come up with the theme, the agenda. All of this was done by them. So really, thank you so much. Also, our sponsors, it is not easy to do the forum without having resources. And this is not easy. Sometimes it can be stressful if you don't have the money on time. But we are really very grateful for those that have committed to support these forums. Of course, Walk Free, Freedom Fund, the ARCS Foundation. As you know, Daniel ARCS is the founder of the forum, but also one of the sponsors of the forum since then, and the International Labour Organization. So they help to make sure that we can have the resources that are needed to make this happen. This is the first of the 7 forums. So you can imagine running these things 7 in 1 year. From here, I think, there is an online forum for Latin America. That is, I think, scheduled for next month. Yeah, that will be in April. So that will be online for 3 days, for 2 days. That is led by Dr. Giselle Steele with Aline and our colleague Hema. And then in May will be the Caribbean Forum. We went to the Caribbean last year, and we felt in love. And of course, the charm of the Caribbeans, you just can't get away from it. So we'll be there again, but we are working with the government of Jamaica to organize the Caribbean Forum. That will be from May 20th to the 22nd in Kingston, Jamaica. And then in June, we'll have the European Forum, which will be held in Brussels, Belgium, from the 10th to the 12th. And then the Africa Forum will be in July. That will be online. And the Asia Forum will be in August, also will be online. And the last one will be the Middle East and North Africa Forum that will be held we're still holding on Beirut, Lebanon, pending to the situation in the region. So if that won't be feasible, then we'll have to move to relocate to another place in the region. So that is the lineup of the 7 forums that this team that you can see, as small as you can see, but it's a very mighty, very capable team, and we are just very lucky to have them. Now, as you can see, all of this one will wonder, why is it? But one thing that we have to understand is that these forums are not the movement. And modern slavery movement is not the forum. The forum is just a small part of the movement. And we are very happy that, the forums are contributing a little bit to the movement. So there are so many other, part of the movement that are going on. We're here in Africa, in America, and everywhere. But so the forum also brings a little piece to the foundation of what the movement can be. So far, there have been quite a lot of things that the forum has helped achieve. The Africa Forum helped create the Survival Leadership Academy that is also led by Dr. Giselle. We have the University of Ohio because of the participation at the Global Forum last year, really changed their curriculum on survivor research based on what they took from the Global Forum last year. And I can go on and on just those little pieces. And this is something that is very important. So we don't want to make the forum as come, hey, sit down and let's talk and then go home. So we need to get, to keep the engagement going on. What do we get from this is really the partnership, the collaboration, the networking, and that little things that you can learn here, and that can help inform your programs, your practices, and anything that you want to achieve. The little people, the little connection you can make here, how you continue going back home. That is what we want to make sure this continues, and that is what the forum is all about. That to have really a unified voice, and the forum is a neutral space. Again, it's not the movement, it's part of the movement, is a neutral space. It doesn't have an agenda, even though here everybody thinks that the forum is Free the Slaves. Actually, no, the forum is not Free the Slaves. Free the Slaves helps organize the forum, but the forum is not Free the Slaves. It's not owned by Free the Slaves. It's owned by you. That's why the agenda and all the content is developed by the committee that is led by, for example, for the North America, Brook and Kate and other members. The European Forum, same framework. The Latin America, the Africa, the Asia, all of these forums are really the content and the agenda are done by specific organizations that come together to do this. So Free the Slaves, we do the donkey work, as I like to say, to do the logistics, to make sure behind the scenes we are making sure everything is going very well. The logistics, the infrastructure, anything that really can make the forum successful. That's what the Free the Slave does. And then the moral and intellectual leadership is done by the different groups that come together to create the agenda. So I just wanted to make sure we understand that. So as you come just because you need to help move the movement forward and really meet people, other colleagues, and share, learn, and take away something that we think can help. And these subjects are very critical, as we have seen it. The technology is still an issue within the anti-modern slavery movement, and it's time we start embracing it, understanding the risks, the opportunities, and what really we can achieve in terms of the responses to modern slavery as we integrate technology into our programs and our practices. Now, where do we go from here? I've already explained these upcoming forums, but as I said, the key pieces here is we need to get the conversation going and we need to stay engaged. So a few requests from us. What we want to suggest is the leads of the panels and the workshops we want to suggest you develop blogs to talk about what you have done here. And those blogs will be shared by, Free the Slaves or the forum, mailing list to other people. There are so many people that are on the mailing list, a bit over 1,000. And so this information will be very helpful for them. So if you can, the team will be in touch with you to see either you can have anything that you want to write. And I think, my colleagues will be very thrilled to get that shared. That is, the first request. Now, the second request that we have is, as we do these regional forums, these conversations will help lead up to the global forum. We have planned to have the global forum in 2025. These regional forums, these 7, will happen in 2024, and then next year will be one big global forum. We have yet to know where and how, but one thing I know, the MC is gonna be Davina. Yeah, she's here. Yeah, and this, so we will planning that, but we want really these conversations to help lead, to help really form what we can focus on in 2025 in terms of the global forum. So these conversations, the more you put together those ideas, will help to really inform and how the discussions will be held at the global forum in 2025. And then what we also need to do is really to try to restructure the forum. Right now we have had the committees here and there, but what we want to do now is to have a permanent board for the forum. So we are trying now to recruit some of the board members to form the forum, and a few people will be on that board, but some will be excluded. Of course, over the years, the forum has evolved. Right now, we are seeing an increasing interest from the government. Many governments are joining, including in the planning committees. We have government representatives joining, and that is one of the growth we have seen, of the forum. However, we want to make sure that the forum remains a space for civil society organizations, meaning, everybody included, the survivors, the academia, not the government. However, the government will be always our allies. So what we're thinking to create this board will help sustain the forum, in terms of providing thought leadership, fundraising, engagement, to provide the intellectual leadership for the forum. So we are forming a 9-member board that will present then at the global forum next year. The forum, since Marrakesh in almost 2 years ago, we have appointed 3 ambassadors for the forum. So far we had 3 of them. 2 are survivors, and 1 was a high-profile, individual. And these are Awambuli from Cameroon. She's a survivor, and Grace Kaleche from Kenya. She's also a survivor, and also, the former JTIP ambassador John Richmond was also appointed in Marrakesh as the forum ambassadors. Now their terms will end at the end of 2024. So we will launch soon the call for the appointment of new 3 Freedom from Slavery Forum ambassadors. So, if you have any recommendation of, anybody that you want to recommend, when that call comes out, please respond to it, and we'll be happy to walk you through the process. And we hope that in 2025 at the Global Forum, we will have the forum, the 3 forum ambassadors. And we also have the Elks Award, which is coming up. The Elks Award is designed for survivors, survivors that are doing tremendous work in the communities. This award is a I think, $2,000 that we provide, and it's just for one individual, each individual survivors that want to, to do something on the ground. So you can apply. There is a panel of judges that will really assess the applications and will make the determination who can be awarded with the X award. We always have 2, and these are only for survivors. So the next call will happen in 2025, but it will go out in the second half of the year. And these 2, and the recipient will automatically be the 2 survivors ambassadors for the forum and will be recognized at the global forum. So you can see there are so many things that are happening. But one exciting other thing is the narrative. That Dr. Brook is helping leading on. And the reason is, as part of the movement, we try to continue contributing to the movement. And one of the ways we're contributing is to provide the movement with tools and other important materials to help advance the movement. So the narrative also is one of the key pieces of what really the forum will contribute to the movement. So that's why this process is a global process. It's quite ambitious. So we want to make sure that really at the global forum, we can really present what is the narrative that we are proposing to the movement. It's not a mandatory narrative, but whoever is interested in using it, good. And we want to respond to the question of why should any individual be concerned by human trafficking and modern slavery? We know when we give the example of climate change, we understand everybody feel, kind of started freaking out. Oh, this is really terrible. Well, that's not the idea, that we want to make sure everybody can freak out because of human trafficking, which will be good. But we want to really make sure that the level of concern is as high as it is in other areas. So that's why to have a narrative that, we can all feel like this really reflect what we want people to know about modern slavery and why they should be concerned. That's why this exercise that really Dr. Brook is leading will be helpful to the movement, but also to the general public as well. So those are kind of a few things. I think the team will be preparing a report for this North America forum. They will share the draft with you, and it's always good to take a read of the draft, and then if there is something that you think is not well reflected, just give your feedback, and then before it can be final, and then at the global forum, God willing, when we meet again, we will see what we are discussing, how that is really come together to have it as a global discussion. And we know that there will be so many government now that the government interest is pretty much increasing. So we are lucky that we're going to have the policymakers, the people that can make things happen, and us trying to make sure they can make those things happen. So it'll be a kind of a great gathering again, a bit bigger than what we had last year in Punta Cana, but really the interest of government is a good thing for the movement, so that we make sure that no one will hold the solution. The solution will come from all of us. So thank you so much. This has been 3 great days. I hope we continue the conversation. The team will be in touch with you with the draft of the report. The panel leads and the session workshop leads. The team will be in touch with you to draft, to make sure that we can have a blog and that can be shared, and we continue the conversation until we get to the global forum and all of these that are happening, the narrative, the X award, and also the the nomination for the forum ambassadors. All these are good things that will need really your contribution and your participation and engagement. So thank you so very much on behalf of Free the Slaves and the team. We thank so much for the great work that you've done.